Have you ever wondered what would happen if a poor girl, someone no one ever listens to, stood in a room full of the richest, most powerful people and accused them of living a lie? Imagine the sound of music stopping, crystal glasses trembling, and all eyes turning toward a trembling voice that dares to speak the truth. Welcome back to Swift Tale, the channel where ordinary people become extraordinary through courage, faith, and fate. And if you're visiting us for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because today's story will take you from the shining halls of wealth to the dusty corners of forgotten truth. This isn't just any story, it's about a maid's daughter named Elise, a young girl who had nothing but her eyes, her heart, and her unshakable belief in what she saw. She wasn't born into privilege, didn't attend fancy schools, and certainly wasn't invited to speak among the elite. Yet one night, in front of art experts, millionaires, and critics, she shouted words that froze every heartbeat in the room: that paintings are fake. Those 4 words would tear apart reputations, expose a hidden scandal, and change her life, and her mother's, forever. But let's rewind a little, because every story of truth begins with silence. Before that shocking night, before the laughter, before the disbelief, there was a simple life lived in the shadows of wealth. Elise and her mother, Clara, lived in the servants' quarters of a sprawling French estate belonging to the esteemed Monsieur Duval, one of the most influential art collectors in Europe. To the outside world, Duval was a man of grace, intellect, and sophistication, a patron of beauty who preserved history through art. But to those who worked for him, he was distant, calculating, and obsessed with maintaining his reputation. Clara, humble and hardworking, spent her days polishing marble floors and dusting priceless antiques she could never dream of owning. Her hands were always tired, her back always aching, but her love for her daughter never dimmed. She dreamed that Elise, her little girl with curious brown eyes, would one day escape this life of servitude. Elise, on the other hand, found beauty even in the scraps of art books discarded by the household staff. While others saw trash, she saw lessons. While others cleaned the gallery, she studied it, each brushstroke, each texture, each subtle hue. And in that grand hallway where Duval's most prized possession hung, a painting titled La Belle Lumière, Elise saw something that no one else dared to notice. To her, the painting wasn't what it seemed. The colors felt wrong. The expression in the subject's eyes lacked soul. The brushwork too mechanical, too precise. She didn't know much about art science, but she knew what her heart felt, and something in her heart whispered, "This isn't real." Now imagine being a maid's daughter in a world where truth is owned by the rich. Who would believe her? Who would listen to a child when experts had already declared the painting authentic? In Duval's estate, art wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol of power, legacy, and deception. Yet, Elise's innocent curiosity was about to unravel a secret that could bring that empire crashing down. As you'll soon see, this story isn't only about art, it's about perception. It's about the fine line between truth and illusion, between what is seen and what is believed. It's about how courage can come from the most unexpected places. Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice, pure and unafraid, to challenge a lie that has been painted over for years. Before we dive deep into this tale of mystery, betrayal, and bravery, I want to ask you something. If you were in Elise's place, poor, powerless, but certain of the truth, would you dare to speak out? Would you risk everything, even your mother's livelihood, just to expose a secret that could destroy powerful people? Keep that question in your heart as we begin. In the next chapters, you'll walk through the golden corridors of Duval's mansion, where art gleams under chandeliers but secrets rot beneath the surface. You'll meet the people who shape Elise's destiny, the loyal maid who fears losing her job, the cold art curator who guards the gallery's reputation, and the young girl whose eyes see beyond the surface. Together, we'll uncover the layers of this deception, one brushstroke at a time. Because beneath every masterpiece lies a story, and sometimes that story isn't what it seems. So sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for an emotional roller coaster. This is not just the story of a painting, it's the story of truth, courage, and a young girl's fight to be heard. Welcome to Swift Tale, where every tale reveals a new truth, and every truth reminds us that even the smallest voice can echo louder than lies. The sun rose gently over the quiet countryside of southern France, casting golden light across the sprawling estate of Monsieur Duval. His mansion stood like a palace carved from marble and pride, a world far removed from the ordinary struggles of those who served within it. The great iron gates at the front were more than just barriers of metal, they were boundaries of class. Inside, wealth shimmered in every chandelier, every painting, every polished piece of silver. Outside, life was far simpler and far harder. Within those walls, Clara the maid began her day long before dawn. Her soft footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as she dusted the antiques, polished the wooden banisters, and arranged the flower vases that would never belong to her. The mansion demanded silence, precision, and invisibility, qualities Clara had learned over years of servitude. Her hands, once soft, were now worn and cracked, carrying the scent of soap and polish. Yet beneath her exhaustion lived a quiet dignity. Every movement she made was filled with care, as if she were guarding something precious, because in truth she was. That something was Elise, her daughter. Elise was 12 when the story truly began, old enough to question the world around her, young enough to still dream without limits. Unlike other children of the servants, Elise didn't play in the gardens or chase the chickens behind the kitchen. She spent her free moments watching the walls. Yes, the walls, because those walls were covered in art, and for her, each painting told a story far more fascinating than anything money could buy. When Clara scrubbed the marble floors of the gallery, Elise would sit in a quiet corner, pretending to read while secretly studying the brushstrokes of masterpieces that hung above her head. Her eyes absorbed the delicate lines of faces, the glimmer of light painted on glass, the movement of clouds captured on canvas. It was her secret classroom, and the mansion her silent teacher. Clara knew that her daughter's curiosity was dangerous. "Don't stare too long, my love," she would whisper, glancing around nervously. "People will think you're getting ideas, and in this house, ideas can cost us our jobs." But Elise would smile softly, her mind already painting stories of her own. Monsieur Duval, the master of the estate, was a man of impeccable taste and impossible pride. He was known across Europe as a collector of fine art, from Renaissance portraits to forgotten treasures restored under his watch. People respected him, envied him, feared him, but they didn't truly know him. Behind his charming smile and cultured voice was a man consumed by one desire, to be seen as the greatest patron of art in modern France. For him, art wasn't about beauty or emotion, it was about power. His gallery, the crown jewel of his estate, held his most prized possession, a painting called La Belle Lumière. Rumor had it that the piece was worth millions, a lost work by the great painter Etienne Verger, rediscovered after decades. Experts had hailed it as genuine, and Duval basked in their admiration. That painting had become his identity, his legacy, and his shield against doubt. But Elise saw it differently. From the first time she laid eyes on La Belle Lumière, something felt off. The colors, though vibrant, seemed too modern, as if the artist's spirit had been copied but not captured. The woman's smile in the painting felt hollow, her eyes lifeless. Elise didn't understand why, but she sensed it. Still, who was she to question the opinions of scholars and curators? A maid's daughter had no right to speak about art. Her words would carry no weight, her insights dismissed as childish imagination. And yet she couldn't stop looking. Every day she'd find a new inconsistency, a line too straight, a shadow misplaced, a tone of blue that didn't belong in Verger's palette. Her mind burned with curiosity, but her mother's warnings echoed louder. "We survive by being silent." Meanwhile, the difference between the rich and the poor inside that mansion was as vast as the sky above them. While Duval dined beneath chandeliers with crystal goblets, the servants ate in a dimly lit kitchen with chipped plates. When guests arrived in carriages and laughter, the staff moved like ghosts in the background scene, but never acknowledged. Clara had accepted this world as unchangeable, but Elise felt it like a bruise. She couldn't understand how two worlds could exist under one roof, one of gold, the other of dust. There was one person, however, who noticed her quiet fascination, Henry, the old gardener, a kind soul with wrinkled hands and gentle eyes. Henry had worked for Duval longer than anyone else. He saw something in Elise, a spark he recognized from his own youth. "You see with your heart, not your eyes," he once told her, handing her a fallen flower petal. "That's what real artists do. Don't lose that gift, little one." His words stayed with her, lighting a fire that neither poverty nor fear could extinguish. And so, while the world of the rich glittered above her, Elise began building a secret world of her own. one of sketches made on scraps of paper, of charcoal drawings hidden beneath her mattress, of dreams whispered to the stars through the attic window. But the mansion had its rules, and breaking them came with consequences. The head housekeeper, Madame Colette, was a stern woman who tolerated no disobedience. She caught Elise once, staring too long at a painting, and snapped, "You're here to clean, not to think." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed something, perhaps jealousy, perhaps fear, because she too lived under Duval's power. One evening, after the guests had left and the halls had grown silent, Elise crept into the gallery again. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting silver beams across the paintings. She stood before La Belle Lumière, the one piece that both fascinated and disturbed her. For the first time, she reached out and brushed her fingers near the edge of the frame, and that's when she saw it, a tiny flake of paint, loosened near the corner, revealing a different color underneath. Her heart skipped a beat. It was small, almost invisible, but to her, it was a clue. "Elise," her mother's whisper hissed from the corridor, "what are you doing here?" Elise turned, startled. "Mama, look," she pointed, but Clara's face turned pale. "Enough." Clara grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "If anyone sees you here, we'll both be thrown out. Do you understand?" "But Mama," the color underneath. "No, Elise." Her mother's voice trembled with fear more than anger. "We are not part of their world. We clean it, we serve it, but we do not question it." As they returned to their small servants' quarters, Elise couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. That one hidden color beneath the paint haunted her dreams. Could it mean something, or was it just a trick of the light? Outside, the rain began to fall softly, tapping against the window like whispers of a secret waiting to be heard. Elise lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart restless. In that moment, she made herself a promise that no matter how poor or powerless she was, she would find the truth behind that painting. Little did she know that single act of curiosity would soon ignite a storm powerful enough to shatter the walls that divided her world from theirs. Because truth, once seen, can never be unseen, the grand hall shimmered with a golden glow that night. Laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers, crystal glasses clinked, and the air was thick with the scent of perfume, pride, and pretension. Tonight was the long-awaited unveiling of La Belle Lumière, the so-called masterpiece that Monsieur Duval claimed would redefine French art history. Every major collector, critic, and aristocrat in Paris had gathered to witness it. Hidden among the sea of silk gowns and polished shoes were the quiet figures of the servants, carrying trays, smiling politely, pretending to be invisible. Among them was Clara, her hands steady but her heart trembling. And just behind her, trying not to be noticed, stood Elise, her daughter, her eyes bright with curiosity and unease. Elise wasn't supposed to be there. She was meant to stay in the servants' quarters below, but something in her heart told her she had to see the painting unveiled. Something deep, instinctive, and unsettling. As Monsieur Duval took the stage, his voice filled the hall. "Mesdames et messieurs," he announced, raising his glass, "tonight you stand before history itself. La Belle Lumière, a rediscovered work of the legendary Etienne Verger, authenticated by the finest experts in Europe." The crowd erupted in applause, cameras flashed, people whispered words like magnifique, priceless, immortal. Then with a flourish, Duval drew the velvet cloth aside. The painting was revealed, a woman bathed in soft morning light, her eyes filled with mystery and melancholy. Gasps filled the room. But while the guests saw beauty, Elise saw something else, something wrong. Her gaze locked on a faint inconsistency in the brushstroke, a shade of blue that didn't belong, a tiny mark she had noticed days ago when she cleaned Duval's study. Her heart began to race. That blue, she remembered it vividly, it was from a modern pigment, one that Verger could never have used centuries ago. Her breath caught. "It's fake," she thought. He lied. As the applause continued, Duval basked in the praise, smiling proudly at the sea of admiration. "This piece," he said, "proves that art, like truth, cannot stay buried forever." And that was when Elise couldn't hold back anymore. The words burst out of her mouth before she even realized what she was doing. "That painting's a fake." The room froze, every sound vanished, heads turned in shock. Elise stood trembling, her small voice echoing across the marble floor. Clara's face went pale. "Elise," she hissed, rushing to her side. "What are you doing?" Duval blinked, his confident expression faltering. "What did you say?" Elise swallowed hard, but her courage didn't waver. "It's a fake, monsieur. The pigment, the blue, it's not Verger. It's from a newer formula. And the light, Verger always painted light from the left, not the right. This one's wrong." Gasps rippled through the crowd. One critic laughed mockingly. "The maid's daughter knows pigments now, how charming." Another whispered, "Ignorant child. Duval should have her thrown out." But Elise stood taller, her eyes locked on Duval. "You know it's true," she said quietly. Duval's face darkened. "Who is this insolent girl?" Clara stepped forward quickly, kneeling. "Please, monsieur, she's my daughter. Forgive her, she doesn't know what she's saying." Duval's voice was cold as ice. "Your daughter just called me a fraud in front of France's finest. You will pack your things and leave my house immediately." "Monsieur, please," Clara begged, tears welling in her eyes. "We have nowhere to go. I'll make her apologize." Elise shook her head. "I won't lie, Mama. He's the one who should apologize to everyone here." The crowd's whispers turned sharp, judgmental. Some found it scandalous, others amusing. Duval, red with fury, stepped closer. "Get them out," he snapped. "Both of them, before they embarrass themselves further." Two guards approached, and Clara clutched Elise's hand. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking. "Say you're sorry, Elise." Elise looked up at Duval one last time. "You can lie to them," she said softly, "but not forever. The truth will show itself, like light breaking through paint." And with that, she turned and walked out beside her mother. Outside, the night air was cold and cruel. The sound of laughter from the hall faded behind them. Clara broke down in the courtyard, sobbing. "What have you done, Elise? We've lost everything." Elise hugged her mother tightly. "I know," she whispered, tears falling. "But Mama, if I didn't speak, who would?" They stood in silence as the rain began to fall, the mansion's lights glowing faintly through the mist. Inside, La Belle Lumière hung on the wall, false, yet adored. But somewhere in that storm, Elise made a silent promise. She would prove the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, the sun rose pale and cold over the cobblestone streets of Paris. The mansion that had once been their world now felt like a distant dream. Clara and Elise sat on a bench near the Seine, their belongings stuffed into two small bags. The wind smelled of rain and regret. Clara's hands trembled as she tried to fold a piece of stale bread for breakfast. "We'll find work," she murmured, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Someone will hire us. We just need to keep quiet for a while." But Elise wasn't listening. Her mind was still trapped in the hall, under the gleam of chandeliers and the weight of her own words. She could still see Duval's furious eyes, hear the mocking laughter of the guests. Yet beneath her fear, something stronger burned, a need for truth. She knew what she saw, the pigment, the brushwork, the light. That painting wasn't real, and if she could prove it, maybe she could clear her mother's name. Maybe they wouldn't just be two discarded servants anymore. That thought became her fire. For the next few days, while Clara searched for cleaning work, Elise wandered through the old art quarters of Paris. She visited antique shops, peered through the dusty windows of restoration studios, and listened quietly whenever artists spoke. She asked innocent questions, too many perhaps, but her hunger for answers was relentless. One evening, she found herself in a narrow alley behind the Rue de Louvre. A flickering sign read, "Atelier Beaumont, Art Restoration." Through the window, she saw a hunched old man carefully brushing varnish onto a cracked canvas. Something about his calm precision drew her in. She hesitated, then knocked. The old man looked up, surprised. "Yes." "Excuse me, monsieur," Elise said softly, stepping inside. I need to ask about a painting." He studied her for a moment, amused by the sight of a servant's daughter in a place like this. "What painting, child?" She took a breath. "La Belle Lumière. It was shown last week at Monsieur Duval's gala. They say it's by Verger." His eyes narrowed. "Ah, that painting." He set down his brush. Everyone is talking about it, why do you ask? Elise bit her lip. Because I think it's fake. Silence, then a low chuckle. You think so? That's a dangerous opinion, young one. I saw it up close, she said quickly. The blue, it was Verge's shade, and the texture was uneven. Please, monsieur, can pigment age differently if someone tries to make it look old? The old man leaned back, intrigued despite himself. Pigment does not lie, he said. If what you describe is true, then the painting could indeed be forged. But to prove it, you'd need samples, records, and access, things Duval guards carefully. Her heart sank, so there's no way. He smiled faintly. I didn't say that. Every lie leaves fingerprints, sometimes in the paint, sometimes in the papers. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old ledger. Etienne Verger kept journals of his techniques. The last volume was stolen decades ago. If you can find it, it might tell you exactly how he painted La Belle Lumière. Then you'll know what's real and what's not. Elise's eyes widened. Where can I find it? He sighed. Rumor says an art dealer named Lucien Morel once tried to sell it, but he vanished after a scandal. Some say he still lives in the old district near Montmartre. That night, Elise returned to the small attic room she shared with her mother, clutching a scrap of paper with Morel's name. Clara looked up from her sewing. You were gone all day. Where were you? Elise hesitated, looking for truth. Clara frowned. Elise, please, enough of this. That man destroyed us. Don't let him take any more. But Elise's voice was calm, almost prophetic. He took everything, Mama. The least I can take back is the truth. The next morning, she set out for Montmartre. The neighborhood was alive with street painters and music, the smell of coffee and oil paint filling the air. After hours of asking, she finally found a small, cluttered shop at the end of a crooked lane. The sign read, El Morel, Antiquities and Art. Inside, dust danced in shafts of light. Canvases leaned against walls, and the air smelled of turpentine. Behind the counter sat an old man with sharp eyes and trembling hands. Are you Lucien Morel? She asked. He looked up, suspicious. Who's asking? My name is Elise. I'm looking for Etienne Verger's missing journal. Do you know where it is? He laughed bitterly. Everyone's looking for that journal, little one. Even Duval offered me a fortune once. But some truths aren't meant to be sold. Her pulse quickened. So you had it. His expression darkened. Had, he said, not anymore. What happened to it? He hesitated, then leaned closer. Years ago, a man paid me to hide the journal. A man who didn't want anyone to know how Verger painted. He said it could ruin him if the truth ever came out. Who was he? Elise whispered. Morel's eyes glinted. Who do you think? Elise's breath caught. Duval. Morel nodded slowly. He knew the painting was fake long before he unveiled it. He bought the forgery, then buried the journal to keep anyone from proving it. But I made a copy just in case. He shuffled to a locked cabinet and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. Inside this are Verger's pigment notes. If you compare them with the painting, you'll know. Elise took it carefully, her fingers trembling. Why are you giving this to me? Because, he said softly, I once worked for Duval too, and I know what it feels like to be silenced. She thanked him and hurried back through the streets, heart pounding. As she crossed the bridge, she opened the envelope and scanned the faded ink. There it was, Verger's formula for his signature blue, a mix of lapis dust and oil, nothing like the modern synthetic used in Duval's painting. It was proof, real proof. When she reached home, she burst through the door. Mama, look, she cried. I found it, the real pigment formula. Duval's painting can't be Verger. Clara stared at her, terrified and proud all at once. Elise, what will you do with it? Elise looked out the window at the city glowing under the dusk. I'll make the world see what he's hiding. I'll make them listen. And as the church bells tolled in the distance, the maid's daughter, poor, dismissed, and unheard, held in her hands the key to unraveling a lie that could shake the art world to its core. The truth was finally within reach. Night fell softly over Paris, blanketing the rooftops in silver. The city seemed unaware of the secret about to surface in its heart, a secret that would shake not just the art world, but Elise's understanding of who she truly was. In their small attic room, Elise spread the contents of the envelope across the table. Faded sketches, pigment notes, and fragments of Etienne Verger's own handwriting glimmered under the candlelight. Her heart pounded as she traced the elegant lines of ink. Each page spoke to her in whispers, the master's techniques, his struggles with light, and his obsession with truth through art. And then, at the very bottom of one page, she saw something that made her breath hitch. A small, handwritten dedication. For C. Delacroix, my muse, my light. Her mother's full name was Clara Delacroix. Elise blinked, stunned. "Mama," she called softly. Clara was mending a torn dress in the corner. "Yes, dear." Elise held up the page. "Did you know Etienne Verger?" Clara froze, needle still in hand. The color drained from her face. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, with a trembling sigh, she set the dress aside. "Where did you find that name?" "In Verger's notes," Elise said. "He wrote to you, 'My muse, my light.' Mama, what does it mean?" Clara's eyes glistened as she sank onto the bed. "I was very young when I met him," she whispered. "Before you were born, I was a servant at his studio, just like I was in Duval's house. He was kind, gentle, different from the others. He painted me once, said I reminded him of the dawn." Elise's voice trembled. "You mean the woman in La Belle Lumière?" Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. "Yes, that woman is me." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Elise's breath caught in disbelief. The painting that had cost them everything, the one Duval paraded as his prized possession, was her mother. But Clara wasn't finished. Her voice broke as she continued. "Verger never finished the painting. He died before he could. The last time I saw it, it was half complete, hidden in his attic. When he passed, his unfinished works were stolen and scattered. Years later, Duval claimed to have found La Belle Lumière, saying it was complete, but that's impossible. Verger never signed it. The version he owns, it's a forgery." Elise sat frozen, tears welling. "So he took your face, Mama, and used it to lie." Clara nodded. "He used everything Verger stood for: truth, light, purity, and turned it into profit." The revelation crashed over Elise like thunder. This wasn't just about exposing a fake painting anymore. It was about reclaiming her mother's dignity, her family's truth. That night, Elise barely slept. She read Verger's notes over and over, searching for anything more. And then, just before dawn, she found a passage scribbled in haste on the back of a letter. "If the world must see her, let them see her in truth, not imitation. The real light lies within the unfinished." Her heart raced. The unfinished painting, it had to still exist somewhere. If she could find Verger's original canvas, she could prove beyond doubt that Duval's version was fake. At sunrise, Elise packed her things and kissed her mother's forehead. "I'll find it," she whispered, "the real La Belle Lumière." Clara caught her wrist. "Elise, please don't go chasing ghosts." Elise smiled faintly. "I'm not chasing ghosts, Mama, I'm following the light." She began her search in the oldest corners of the city, the forgotten art warehouses, the dusty basements of old galleries. Every place smelled of time and turpentine. Most laughed when she asked about lost Verger paintings. Some shook their heads, but one elderly archivist at the Musée d'Orsay paused when she mentioned the word unfinished. "Unfinished, you say?" he muttered, shuffling through records. "There was a canvas like that, Verger's work, unsigned, faded, cracked, sent to private storage years ago by a dealer named Duval." Elise's heart pounded. "Where?" He frowned. "His private vault outside the city." That night, Elise returned home with the truth burning inside her like fire. "Mama," she said breathlessly, "Duval has it, the real painting, he's hiding it." Clara's eyes widened. "If you go near him again, he'll ruin us for good." "I don't care anymore," Elise said firmly. "He already took everything. This time I'll take back the truth." Before Clara could protest, Elise slipped the journal pages into her satchel, her mind set. Outside, Paris shimmered under the moonlight as she made her way toward Duval's estate. She remembered every corner of the place, every hallway, every locked door. The guards were fewer now, the gala was long over. Through a side gate, she entered the dark garden. Her heart thudded as she crept along the familiar walls until she reached the old study. The window was still cracked, just as it had been when she cleaned there months ago. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and silence. Moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating the portrait, the fake one, still hanging proudly on the wall. But Elise wasn't looking at that. Her gaze turned toward the corner bookshelf. She remembered how it had once seemed too thick against the wall. Carefully, she pressed along its edge. A faint click. The shelf shifted slightly. Hidden behind it was a narrow door. Elise's breath caught. She pushed it open and slipped inside. The room beyond smelled of varnish and secrets. And there, leaning against the far wall, covered in dust and canvas, was the truth, the unfinished La Belle Lumière. The real painting, the difference was unmistakable. The brushstrokes were raw, alive. The woman's eyes glowed with genuine emotion, not polished deceit. The light came from the left, just as Verger had written, and in the corner, faint but visible, were the initials E.V., Etienne Verger's real mark. Elise's hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "you're beautiful," he smirked. "I wondered how long it would take before you came crawling back. I suppose you've been busy playing detective." Her heart pounded, but she stood tall. "You stole his work. You stole my mother's face. You lied to the whole world." Duval chuckled darkly. "I perfected what he couldn't finish. The world doesn't want truth, child. They want beauty. They want the illusion." "Illusion isn't beauty," Elise said. "It's cowardice." His smile vanished. "And you think anyone will believe you? You're just a maid's daughter." Elise reached into her bag and held up the journal. "Not just a maid's daughter. Etienne Verger's muse was my mother. That makes me his legacy, and I have proof." For a brief moment, Duval's confidence faltered. Then, with a snarl, he lunged forward. And the candlelight caught the edges of the real painting, illuminating the truth that had been buried for years. The air in the hidden vault was thick with tension, every breath heavy with dust and dread. The candlelight flickered between them, Elise and Duval, two figures standing on opposite sides of truth. The unfinished masterpiece glowed faintly behind her, as if Etienne Verger's spirit itself watched the scene unfold. Duval's eyes glinted with rage. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, stepping closer. "You have no idea what you've just done." Elise stood her ground. Her pulse was racing, but her voice was steady. "I know exactly what I've done. I've found the truth you tried to bury." He gave a low laugh, bitter and venomous. "Truth, child, the truth doesn't pay bills. The truth doesn't build empires. I took a forgotten, unfinished scrap of paint and turned it into a legend. Without me, Verger would still be nothing but a name collecting dust." "You turned his art into a lie," Elise shot back, "and you used my mother's face to sell it." Duval's smirk faltered for just a second, but then he stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the light between them. "Your mother was a servant. She was lucky Verger even looked at her, let alone painted her. You think anyone cares whose face is in that frame?" Elise's eyes flashed with defiance. "I care, and someday the world will too." With that, she turned toward the real painting. Her fingers brushed the edge of the canvas, the soft, unfinished strokes of her mother's image glowing gently beneath the candlelight. "This," she said quietly, "is the real La Belle Lumière, not that polished lie you showed to the world." Duval lunged forward, snatching the journal from her hand. "Enough," he roared. "You're nothing but a child playing with fire." Elise tried to grab it back, but he shoved her aside. She stumbled, hitting the floor hard. "You think anyone will believe a servant's daughter over me? I own the galleries. The critics owe me favors. I write the stories they tell." She looked up at him, her cheeks streaked with tears and dust. "You can buy their silence," she whispered, "but you can't silence the truth forever." Duval sneered, tearing the envelope open and letting the pages flutter to the ground. "If I burn this, there'll be nothing left of your so-called proof." But as he struck a match, Elise sprang to her feet. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest thing, the candle holder, and swung it against his arm. The match fell, sputtering out before it could touch the papers. Duval stumbled back, clutching his arm in fury. "You little—" Elise didn't wait. She snatched the journal pages from the floor and dashed toward the door, heart hammering. Behind her, Duval roared in anger, "Guards, stop her!" She burst out of the hidden room and into the corridor, her footsteps echoing against the marble. The mansion was quiet, too quiet, but from down the hall she heard heavy boots approaching. "Over there!" a guard shouted. Elise ran faster, weaving through the dark hallways she once cleaned. Memories flashed, the laughter from the gala, her mother's tears, the humiliation. Not anymore, she thought, not this time. She reached the back stairwell, the one that led toward the old servant's exit, but before she could reach it, Duval's voice bellowed behind her. "You can't hide, girl, you don't matter." She didn't turn around. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but her will carried her forward. She pushed through the back door into the cold night air. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, a soft, relentless drizzle that turned the cobblestones slick beneath her shoes. She sprinted toward the gate, clutching the precious journal to her chest. Behind her, Duval and two guards followed, their lanterns swinging like ghostly fire. "Stop her," he yelled. "That paper belongs to me." Elise turned a corner, slipping through a narrow path toward the stables. The horses neighed anxiously at the sound of shouting. Thinking fast, she grabbed one of the stable lamps and threw it to the ground. It shattered, sparks flaring as hay caught fire. Flames leapt up instantly, spreading across the dry straw. The guards halted, shouting in panic. Duval cursed, waving his arm as the firelight painted his face in fury. Using the chaos, Elise ducked through a side gate and into the misty forest that bordered the estate. Branches whipped at her arms as she ran, the rain turning to a downpour, but she didn't stop until the mansion's lights were gone. When she finally reached a clearing, she collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The journal pages were damp but safe beneath her coat. She clutched them tightly, her tears mixing with the rain. The truth was in her hands now, but it wouldn't mean anything if no one believed her. She needed proof, witnesses, a voice loud enough to drown out Duval's lies. She thought of the old restorer, Monsieur Beaumont, the only man who had believed her. Maybe he could help her analyze the pigments. Maybe, just maybe, together they could expose everything. With renewed resolve, Elise rose to her feet and began the long walk back toward the city lights. Hours later, in a cafe on the edge of the art district, Beaumont looked up in shock as the door burst open. Elise stood there, soaked and shivering, clutching the envelope like a relic. "Child," he exclaimed, rushing to her side. "What happened?" "I found it," she gasped, breathless. "The real painting hidden in Duval's vault, and I have Verger's notes. He forged everything, Monsieur Beaumont. He used my mother's face." Beaumont's eyes widened. Good heavens! He quickly lit another lamp, spreading the papers across the table. His experienced eyes scanned every line. This is genuine. These are Verger's original formulas." Elise nodded. "Can you prove it?" The old man hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Yes, but it will take time and courage. Once we expose him, there's no turning back." Elise met his gaze. "I'm not turning back." As dawn broke over Paris, the first golden light touched the cafe window, soft, pure, and honest. The same light Verger once sought to capture in his art. And for the first time, Elise felt it too, the light of truth beginning to rise. But far away, in the mansion she had fled, Duval stood at the window, staring into the storm. His eyes burned with hatred. "If that girl dares to show her face again," he muttered, "I'll destroy her and her proof." The battle for truth had only just begun. Morning light spilled over the Paris skyline, washing the city in pale gold. The streets were waking, shopkeepers opening shutters, newspaper boys shouting headlines, but somewhere above the hum of daily life, something extraordinary was about to happen. In a quiet studio at the back of an old art restoration shop, Elise stood beside Monsieur Beaumont, both of them staring at the easel before them. Upon it rested the unfinished painting, the true La Belle Lumière. The strokes were delicate, emotional, and raw. Unlike the fake Duval displayed, this one had soul. The colors danced in the light, revealing Verger's signature style, unmistakable, alive, and sincere. Beaumont adjusted his spectacles, carefully comparing the pigments under his magnifying lens. "See here," he murmured. "Verger used lead tin yellow in his early works, a pigment that Duval's forgery lacks. And this brushwork, look closely, my dear. No imitator could have reproduced this fluidity." Elise leaned in, her heart pounding. "So it's real." "Without question," he said softly. "And this journal you brought, these notes correspond exactly with the unfinished sections of this canvas. There can be no doubt. You, Elise, have uncovered Verger's lost masterpiece." Elise swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "My mother, she was the model. He painted her before he died. Duval must have found the piece after and finished it himself." Beaumont nodded gravely. "He exploited her likeness and your mother's legacy for his own gain." The truth settled between them like a silent storm. The question now wasn't if they could prove it, it was how to make the world listen. "Duval controls the galleries," Elise said bitterly. "No one will publish anything against him." Beaumont smiled faintly. "Then we must make it impossible for him to hide. The world believes what it sees. If we show them the truth, they will not be able to unsee it." 2 nights later, a major exhibition was held at the Grand Palais, The Legacy of Etienne Verger. Duval was the centerpiece of attention, his fake La Belle Lumière displayed under golden lights, critics and journalists surrounding him like moths to a flame. "Ah, Monsieur Duval," one reporter exclaimed, "they say your eye for art is unmatched. You've single-handedly revived Verger's reputation." Duval smiled his rehearsed smile, sipping champagne. "Just doing my duty to art," he replied coolly. "Truth and beauty are my only goals." But even as he spoke, the grand hall's atmosphere began to shift. A murmur spread through the crowd, whispers, curious looks toward the entrance. The doors had opened, and Elise stepped inside, dressed modestly but walking with quiet confidence. Beside her, Monsieur Beaumont carried a wrapped canvas and a small case. Duval's smile faltered the instant he saw her. "What is she doing here?" he muttered to his assistant. Elise approached the podium where the masterpiece hung. "Monsieur Duval," she called, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I believe there's been a mistake." Every eye turned. Duval's face reddened. "This is a private event," he said coldly. "Servants are not invited." "I'm not here as a servant," Elise replied steadily. "I'm here as the daughter of the woman whose face you stole." Gasps rippled through the audience. A photographer raised his camera instinctively. "Stole," Duval scoffed. "Preposterous." Beaumont stepped forward, unwrapping the canvas he carried. The crowd leaned in as the true painting was revealed, Verger's unfinished La Belle Lumière. The resemblance was undeniable, yet the difference was stark. The original glowed with authenticity, its brushstrokes tender and human. The version Duval displayed looked cold, calculated, a copy with no heartbeat. "This," Beaumont announced, "is Etienne Verger's final work, verified through pigment analysis, stylistic comparison, and cross-referenced with the artist's own notes. The painting hanging here tonight is a forgery." The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some disbelieving. "Lies," Duval snapped. "You're both imposters. That painting is a student's imitation." Elise stepped forward, holding up Verger's handwritten journal. "This is his proof, his sketches, his formulas, even his notes about the model. My mother's name, Celeste Marchand, appears here. You used her face, Duval. You finished his painting and passed it off as your discovery." Duval lunged forward, snatching for the journal, but Beaumont blocked him. "Enough," he thundered. "We have witnesses and chemical tests ready to be demonstrated." The head curator, pale and trembling, stepped closer. "Monsieur Beaumont, is what she says true?" Beaumont opened the small case and took out a handheld analyzer. He pressed it gently to the corner of Duval's painting. The screen flickered with data. "See, synthetic ultramarine, manufactured decades after Verger's death." Gasps filled the hall again. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled furiously. Duval's mask began to crumble. His voice rose, desperate now. You think anyone will believe a maid's daughter over me? I made this world, you're nothing. Elise's voice was calm, resolute. You made lies, and tonight lies end. With trembling hands, the curator gestured for the guards. Monsieur Duval, you must come with us. He struggled, shouting curses as the guards escorted him away. The crowd parted, whispering. Some pitied him, others watched with cold judgment. Elise stood silent, watching him disappear. She didn't feel joy, only peace. Beaumont laid a hand on her shoulder. The truth always comes out, child. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. A week later, the headline spread across Paris and beyond. Art world scandal. Famed collector exposed for forgery. Maid's daughter reveals true masterpiece. The story captured hearts everywhere, not just because of the fraud, but because of her courage. The original La Belle Lumière was restored and displayed in the Louvre, this time with a small plaque beneath it. Model Celeste Marchand, her light lives forever. Elise stood before it during the opening ceremony, tears welling in her eyes. People around her admired the painting, but none could understand the depth of what it meant to her: justice, legacy, and love. Monsieur Beaumont smiled beside her. You've done more than prove a truth, Elise. You've rewritten history. She smiled faintly. I didn't do it alone. But as the applause filled the gallery, a shadow lingered in the back of the room. Duval, disgraced and bitter, had vanished after his arrest, but rumors whispered he was planning revenge. Elise didn't know that yet. For now, all she saw was light, her mother's face immortalized in beauty, not deception. And for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. The scandal that rocked Paris didn't fade quietly. It exploded across Europe like wildfire. Newspapers screamed headlines for weeks. Collector's empire crumbles after forgery scandal. Maid's daughter brings down art titan. The real La Belle Lumière revealed. Elise's name became known everywhere. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was the truth-teller, the girl who stood against corruption, the voice of justice in the world of art. But fame, as she soon learned, brought its own shadows. Everywhere she went, cameras followed. Journalists begged for interviews. Some praised her courage, others questioned her motives. They twisted her story into something sensational, the girl who outsmarted Paris, the Cinderella of the art world. But for Elise, the attention felt strange, almost unreal. She didn't want glory, she wanted peace. One morning, a letter arrived at her small apartment. No return address. The handwriting was sharp and elegant. You think you've won, little girl, but truth has a price. Day. Her hands trembled as she read it. Duval. After the scandal, he'd been stripped of his titles, banned from every major gallery, and charged with fraud. But before his trial could begin, he had vanished, disappearing into the night like smoke. Some said he'd fled to Switzerland. Others claimed he'd taken his own life. Elise never believed he was gone. Monsieur Beaumont urged her to stay cautious. He's a wounded man, my dear, and wounded men are dangerous. But Elise refused to hide. If I live in fear, she said softly, then he still wins. Still, the letter haunted her thoughts. Weeks passed. Her life slowly found rhythm again. She spent long hours in the Louvre's restoration department, studying art preservation. The museum had offered her a scholarship, a gesture of gratitude and recognition. Every day, she visited her mother's painting. Standing before La Belle Lumière brought her peace. The soft glow of Verger's strokes reminded her of everything she'd fought for: truth, dignity, and love. But one night, that peace shattered. Elise stayed late, working alone in the museum's archives. The hallways were quiet, dimly lit by the orange glow of gas lamps. As she finished cataloging a set of sketches, she heard a faint sound behind her, a creak, like a footstep. "Hello," she called, turning. "Silence." She frowned. The security guard had already made his rounds. Maybe it was just the old building settling, she told herself. But then, another sound, closer this time. Her breath caught. A figure emerged from the shadows. Duval. He looked different, thinner, paler, eyes burning with fury and madness. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his hands trembling. "You ruined me," he rasped. "Everything I built, gone because of you." Elise took a step back. "You ruined yourself, Duval. I only told the truth." "The truth," he laughed bitterly. "You don't understand the world, girl. People don't care about truth. They care about power. And you took mine." He moved closer, the dim light catching the wild gleam in his eyes. "But tonight, I take something back." Elise's heart pounded. She glanced toward the emergency button near the door. "Too far." "Don't do this," she said quietly. "You've lost enough." He sneered. "You think you can destroy a man like me and walk away?" He lunged. Elise ducked aside, the table crashing as he stumbled. She grabbed a metal lamp and swung it instinctively. It hit his shoulder, sending him staggering backward. He cursed, clutching his arm. "You'll pay for this, you ungrateful wretch." Elise ran for the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the marble corridor. Duval followed, his voice echoing behind her. "You think they love you? They'll forget you in a month." She turned a corner, desperate, and ran straight into a guard. "Help," she cried. "He's here, Duval." The guard raised his light, but by the time they turned back, Duval was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the museum. They searched for hours, but he had vanished again. Days later, the police found signs that Duval had fled Paris entirely. His accounts were empty, his properties abandoned, but rumors spread that he had been seen near the border, working under a false name, plotting revenge. Elise tried to move on, but unease lingered. She felt his eyes everywhere, in the crowd, in the galleries, even in her dreams. Monsieur Beaumont noticed the change in her. "You've faced darkness, my child," he said gently. "Don't let it steal your light." Elise smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what he wants, for me to be afraid." "Then don't give him that victory," Beaumont said. "Live brightly, that is the truest revenge." Months passed. Elise began holding small lectures about art authenticity, using her story as a lesson to inspire young artists and restorers. Her courage became a beacon, a reminder that truth, no matter how buried, can always rise again. But one winter evening, as snow fell gently over the Seine, she received another package. No note this time, just a single object wrapped in brown paper. She unwrapped it slowly and froze. Inside was a fragment of an old painting. The corner bore Verger's unmistakable brushstroke, but the rest had been slashed, violently, cruelly, as if someone had tried to destroy beauty itself. On the back, written in red ink, were two chilling words. "Not over." Elise's breath trembled, but then she straightened her shoulders. She turned to the window, watching the snow fall outside, the Paris lights shimmering in the distance. "You can't erase the truth," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." She placed the damaged fragment beside her mother's restored portrait in her studio, a silent reminder of both light and darkness, the beauty of truth and the cost of revealing it. Outside, the bells of Notre Dame rang through the night, solemn, steady, eternal. Elise smiled softly, her reflection merging with her mother in the glass. Even if Duval's shadow lingered somewhere beyond the city, she knew one thing for certain. Her mother's light would never be dimmed again. Months turned into a year. The chaos faded, the headlines vanished, and Paris returned to its rhythm of beauty and noise. Yet somewhere within the Louvre's quiet halls, one painting still whispered of courage, La Belle Lumière. Elise stood before it once again, the early morning light streaming through the tall glass windows and spilling across the marble floor. The museum was still closed to the public, but she liked it that way. Silence made the truth easier to hear. The painting looked different now, though the strokes hadn't changed. Maybe it was her, the young woman staring back at her from the canvas. Her mother no longer looked sorrowful or forgotten. There was peace in her eyes now, as though she finally knew she was seen, remembered, and loved. Elise smiled faintly. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. "They know who you were." Behind her, Monsieur Beaumont approached slowly, his cane tapping softly against the floor. Every time I see this masterpiece, I think of you, he said gently. You restored not only the painting, but the truth itself. Elise turned to him. I just couldn't let lies win. Beaumont smiled. And because you didn't, generations will learn your story. That's what truth does, it survives. For a moment, they stood together in silence. Then, with a sigh of contentment, he added, Do you know, my dear, the most powerful art isn't painted on canvas. It's the courage written in people's hearts. Elise nodded slowly, her gaze still on the painting. I think I finally understand that. Outside, the city began to stir, the distant rumble of carriages, laughter echoing from the streets below, the bells of Notre Dame tolling in the crisp morning air. Elise stepped out of the museum and into the sunlight. She carried with her a small notebook, filled with sketches and ideas, not of fame or scandal, but of beauty, truth, and memory. The world had tried to silence her, but she had answered with light. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky over Paris in gold and violet, Elise sat by the riverbank. The Seine shimmered with reflections of the city lights. She opened her notebook and began to write. Art is not about perfection. It's about honesty. Even in the smallest truth, there is beauty. And even in the darkest lie, there is a lesson. Her pen paused. She thought of Duval, a man consumed by greed, blinded by his hunger for recognition. Somewhere out there, perhaps he still lived, nursing bitterness like a wound. But Elise no longer feared him. The truth had freed her from his shadow. She smiled faintly, closing the notebook. Let him paint with lies, she murmured. I'll paint with light. As the final chords of your background music swell, gentle piano and soft violin, the narrator's voice, your voice, begins the closing message to the audience. Sometimes the greatest masterpieces are not the ones hanging in museums, but the ones born from truth, courage, and love. Elise's story reminds us that no matter how powerful lies may seem, they will always fade, but truth shines forever. So if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even one voice can make a difference, then don't forget to give this video a like, share it with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe to our channel, Swift Tale, where every story reveals something beautiful about the human spirit. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what does truth mean to you? Is it something you fight for or something you discover?